Hey guys, Parfax here. Today, I'm bringing you a tips and tricks on leveling your first character in New World. All right, let's get started. So you've logged into New World, and for the first time in a Turnum, you want to level your character, or maybe you're just trying to level your character a little bit more efficiently than you did last time. Well, if either of those things sound like something you're interested in, this video is for you. So the first tip that I always give people, and it's pretty basic, but do all the quests in the starting area. The starting area is going to be a beach. You're going to go there. You're going to go up to one of the main quest givers. And when you go there, it's going to have you do a bunch of essentially tutorial quests. Now, one of the reasons why this is actually very important is because we want to get to a decent level before we get into town. Now, if you really want to skip these quests, you don't actually have to do them. You can just go into town and start grabbing quests from there, but I really suggest doing these because it gives you a really good baseline for your character. Now, during one of these quests, it's going to have you create a tool. It's going to be a skinning knife. Now, anytime I get to that point, it's going to have you gather some wood and it's going to have you gather some flint. While doing this, I always make sure that I gather a little bit extra, because what I do here is I'll actually gather enough resources for all my tools. Now, it's very little how much resources you need for those tools, but I always make sure I gather them all because this is going to be a great spot to actually start gathering. Now that we have our tools made, what do we need to gather? Now, one of the main things that I always try to gather is, I'm horrible at pronouncing stuff, but I think it's like hyssop or something like that. Essentially, it's a little purple flower that you can pick up to make your potions. Potions are going to be something you're going to need to make throughout the process. You can eventually buy them, but it's super cheap and easy to actually make these first beginning health potions, and they're extremely useful. Even if you don't plan on leveling your Arcana eventually down the road, it is still very important, in my opinion, to actually gather these right off the bat because there's a lot in a small area and they're extremely useful. You can sell them if you want to, but I always get as much as I can and I make them all into potions. Now, while you're there, you can actually do stuff like you can skin boars, you can hit rocks, you can chop wood, but those things aren't quite as useful. I always try to at least chop a tree or two. I try to get a few hogs, which is another big thing. And then I try to gather all the gathering materials like the hyssop or however you want to call it. I always try to gather a bunch of those. Now that we've started gathering and we're starting to progress through the quest line, as you're questing, you will start to get a few different weapons. If you decide to swap off the sword and shield, one of the big things is to make sure you take off your shield, because your shield will actually add weight to your armor system, and you want to remember to take that off because we don't want any extra weight on there. We're going to get all of our weight from our armor, so if you're not using that shield, make sure you take it off. Also, when it comes to extra armor and weapons, make sure you scrap them. You can deconstruct them by, if you look in your inventory, you can right click it, it'll bring up a prompt, and all you have to do is, it's like Shift S or something like that, and it will actually deconstruct it and it'll give you repair parts. And this is what you're going to use to actually repair your tools, your armor, and your gear as you go along. Now that we are starting to get levels, there's a few things you should keep in mind. First is that you take very little fall damage. What this means is if you're up on a high ridge and you're trying to get down below to, if you're going from point A to point B and there's a big cliff in your way, feel free to jump off it because you take such little fall damage. I don't know if I've actually killed myself from full health by fall damage. I'm sure there's places in the game where you can, because you can get up pretty high, but feel free to jump off that thing because you're going to take very little fall damage. Next, remember to pick up any blue glowing piece of paper. What these are essentially pieces of lore the game has spread around, which are pretty cool to read, but they also give you experience when you pick them up. It takes you a split second, and typically it's worth more than just killing a mob. Once you hit level 5, it is very important to actually put on a second weapon. Even if you don't like that weapon, there's an animation cancel you can do, and you'll actually see a video in the description down below of me talking about that animation cancel, and it'll allow you to actually move quicker. Essentially what you can do is when you dodge roll, you can do a weapon swap, and it'll cancel out the animation for your dodge, allowing you to move a little bit quicker. So when you hit level 5, make sure you put on that second weapon. Next, let's talk a little bit about stamina. The first thing to keep in mind when it comes to stamina is that if you run out of stamina, it actually regens faster than if you don't. So if you get all the way down to 0, your bar will go gray, making you not able to actually regen stamina, or not be able to use your stamina, and it'll regen really quickly. But if you just use it once and you have, let's say, 50 stamina left, it will actually regen slower than if you would have just dodged again and ran out of stamina. Now that we're talking about dodging and stamina, let's give you another crucial tip that a lot of people don't know. When dodging, as long as you have at least 1 stamina and your bar is glowing like an orangish color, which means you're not in the full stamina regen phase, you can actually dodge. So one tip I like to do is if you have a dodge that costs 50 stamina and you have 100 stamina, what you can do is you'll dodge once, wait a split second, it'll start regenning, it'll get up to 51, and then you can dodge 2 more times, allowing you to dodge 3 times with your stamina pool instead of 2. Now that you're leveling up and you're gonna start getting attribute points. Now, I have one rule of thumb when it comes to attribute points is I always put the first 50 points into Constitution. Why, you may ask? Because the first 50-point bonus for Constitution buffs your health pots by 20%. Again, if you go back to remember when I was talking about picking up the gathering herbs to make health potions, we're going to use a lot of them, and giving that bonus by 20% is absolutely huge. Now, if you want to make the leveling process really easy, this may seem a bit weird, but actually stack Constitution. If you stack Constitution, you'll be pretty tanky, and your base damage will be plenty enough to actually kill the mobs, and you can actually start pulling a bunch of mobs at once. The problem when you start going through the leveling process, if you're doing it solo especially, that the mobs hit so hard that you'll actually die, and the damage you output isn't a big deal because you're actually dying. You can only pull 1 or 2 mobs at a time. But once you start stacking Constitution, you'll actually be able to pull massive amount of mobs really easily. I was able to do some of the elite farms solo if the mobs were my level or even a little bit above. Because I put a bunch of points into Constitution, I could actually survive it and heal through essentially all of it with my health potions or any other abilities on my bar. And we're able to do a lot more content than if I just stacked whatever my primary resource is. Now with attributes, one of the things you want to make sure you keep in mind is each attribute point's breakpoints. What these are essentially extra passive points you get for leveling up your attributes to a certain point. The points are 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, and 300. Each attribute point or each attribute has its own scaling, so you'll have different passives. You can go ahead and read up on which ones you like, and it's part of the reason why I like the Constitution so much is because that 50-point passive is one of my favorite in the game. But keep in mind, when you're leveling up your attribute points, you're going for those breakpoints, and then if you want to swap to, let's say, from Constitution to Intelligence, then once you hit 50, that's when you start stacking into Intelligence. And if you get a couple points above 50, feel free to either swap your gear, take a few points out, everything like that to rebalance it. Again, 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300 for all your breakpoints. Those are the points you want to hit. As you start to level up, you're going to be able to put points into your region, giving you some pretty cool bonuses. Now, as a rule of thumb, when it comes to putting points into your region, I always have 1 or 2 leveling regions. What this means are places like Monarch's Bluff, Brightwood, are a few places, especially in the mid to early game, I like to put a bunch of points into experience. So when I'm there, I'm actually leveling up a lot faster. Some of these areas, you're going to have a lot of main story quests, and it's really good to pump up your experience. But once you hit level 60, this is a dead stat. So you want to make sure that if you're planning on spending all of your end game or most of your end game in a specific region because your company is based out of there, or if it's just a region you really like, maybe not spend very many points into experience. Now putting a point or 2 in there, in my opinion, is always good because obviously there's diminishing returns. The more points you put into it, the less you're going to get per point. So you can put a few points into it in every region, but as a rule of thumb, I like to have 1 or 2, maybe 3 leveling regions. And then my main region that I want to play the end game in, I don't like to put EXP in there. I like to do things such as quicker gathering is always a must for me in any region. I always go with those. And then I love to put points into my storage. Give me more storage. You're going to need it for all your gathering material because this game has a lot of gathering. It's just a very, very good stat. Now, if you have a place like Monarch's Bluff where you do all of your marketplace, make sure you take the point where it gives you less taxes when you sell your goods. If you have a main city that you craft in, make sure you do the one that gives you less crafting fee. So it really tailors to how you want to play. But as a rule of thumb, again, I have 1 or 2, maybe 3 leveling regions. I always put points into quicker gathering if you're there at all. And then I love storage, and then just kind of tailor the rest to how you like to play. If you have a market city, market. If you have a place where you craft everything, put points into crafting. Now that we have a good baseline to our character, let's start talking about gearing, questing, and leveling. When it comes to questing, I pick up every quest I can. I don't always do every quest, but I make sure that I have the option to do as many quests in an area as possible. Now, one thing to remember is you can quest from any city. So if you start running out of quests, you can actually go to another city to pick up a few more. Now remember that if you go there, if you don't have anything in that region unlocked, you might get less things like experience, gathering speed, all that kind of stuff that you can level in the region. But if you get stuck, it's a great way to get a couple extra quests. Now, one important thing to do is to complete the faction quest as fast as possible. At around level 8 or 9, you'll be able to pick your faction through a faction quest. It's important to do this because it unlocks faction quests and allows you to join a guild. Once you've unlocked the faction quests, I start to prioritize the faction quests and the storyline quests. Each city has a faction representative, and you can do 3 quests a day for bonus rewards. You can find those at the top of your screen whenever you go to your faction vendor. It'll say a 0, a 1, 2, or 3 out of 3. And when you complete a faction quest from them, it'll give you a little bit extra rewards. It's really nice to do. This faction vendor is also how you're going to get some of the best leveling gear in the game. The currency that you get while doing these faction quests are what you actually use for getting your faction gear. So make sure you take advantage of it. Once you get the gear you need, I just go back to doing the same 3 quests a day in each city. Now, when it comes to faction quests, there's 2 different types. There's a basic type, what I call it. It's essentially the top row when you go to your faction vendor. It'll be quests you can go to. You don't have to be flagged. They're your typical quests. Then there's the bottom set of quests that will make you flag for them. You can't fast travel. If you die, you lose them, but they give you more rewards than the top set of quests. And they are repetitive and are typically in the same area, and they're the same quests over and over again. Now, these are best done in a group. If you can get a nice group together of your faction, go out and complete these a few times, you'll have your gear in no time. So I really suggest you getting in a nice large group, going out there and just spamming these quests to get the gear you need while you're leveling up. So when you're buying gear off the faction vendor, there's a few things to keep in mind. First, each piece of vendor gear comes with constitution and another stat. So light armor comes with intelligence constitution, medium armor comes with dexterity constitution, and heavy armor comes with strength constitution. Now, if you're looking at Let's Go in a medium armor intelligence based character, don't worry, it's not a big deal. You can actually fix that. So there's also a rune for each attribute point on the faction vendor you can actually use to craft the correct stat on your gear. All it takes is the rune, which is 100 faction points, and 50 Azoth per craft. And all you do is you take the piece of gear that you want to change, you make sure you have 50 Azoth, and you make sure you have the correct rune, and you just go to the crafting bench and you can go craft yourself the right stat on it. So we're leveling, we're getting stuff done. We're almost level 25. At this point, we can stop doing quests and start grinding mobs if you'd like. This can be done one of 2 ways. The first way is to start grinding dungeons. At level 25, you're going to get a quest to go to your first dungeon, and you can actually go through this dungeon multiple times to get pretty decent experience. You'll be able to pick up the quest and do it over and over and over again. Especially if you have a decent group with you, you can do it multiple times and get pretty decent experience. The second way, and which is my favorite, is to grind overland dungeons. What these are essentially dungeons that have elite mobs and a lot of them, but they're not instants, and there's a lot more mobs in these. First one is in Dead Man's Cove, which is in the southwest part of Monarch's Bluff. This will be one of the fastest ways to level up your weapons and your character. There's at least a dungeon or an overland dungeon in each zone, so make sure you go to these and really take advantage of them. You can get things like Azoth, you'll get a bunch of weapons, you'll get a bunch of potions, you'll get a bunch of stuff by especially doing these overland dungeons. You will 100% see me there when launch comes. From here on out, we'll be doing the same loop of always focusing the main story mission, and then we'll be doing faction quests whenever we need to gear up. We'll also be doing any quests in any area that we're in, and we'll be grinding nearby mobs in either dungeons or overland dungeons, all the way up to 60. If you start to get bored, make sure you kill a few corrupted portals, which give you Azoth and some pretty good experience. The most important part of leveling or just playing any MMO at all is to make sure you have fun. To get to 60, it is going to take some time, and rushing it can be a grueling experience and can burn you out if you are only doing the fastest ways to level. I know as I level, I always make sure I find time to do things like PvP, mess around with other guildmates, take forts, and just other fun stuff that can be seen as not productive. Enjoy leveling as much as possible and get there on your own time. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can watch me stream on Twitch. I have all the information down below in the description down below. If you are looking for anything New World, make sure you slap that subscribe button. We're going to have a ton of videos coming out. We're going to have builds, we're going to have guides, we're going to have everything New World coming out. So make sure you slap that subscribe button here on YouTube, and I hope to see you in a tournament. Peace.